Boatworks today is sponsored by Total Boat and Alexial Yacht Coatings, as well as supported by the generosity from the beautiful folks over on Patreon. Thank you so much. So welcome back to the shop, everybody. Hope you're all doing very well. My name is Andy with Boatworks today, and this week I was primarily focused on getting the glass laid up on this transom. And when you're working with fiberglass and resin, you're pretty much under the time crunch every step of the way, because that resin, it's going to set up whether you're ready for it or not. It could care less where you're at. And because of that, my focus was on the task at hand, which means I was able to get a lot done, but it can't say that it really makes for a very entertaining, let alone educational video. So what I think I'm going to do here is I'm just going to let this process play out, and then when I get to certain points, I'm going to highlight and talk about some of the top tips and tricks and little secrets that you can use in your own fiberglass projects to really set yourself up for success. And tip number one, as basic as it may seem, is to have all of your material that you're going to need for that day. Have all of that material pre-cut to size, labeled, and stacked in order that you're going to be needing them. The less you have to actually think while you're going through this process, the better off you're going to be. The less likelihood you are going to actually make a mistake. So here, I've already decided which edges I want to focus on first, and I've gone through and labeled them 1 through, I think this ended up going through 1 through 8. Now, the real simple way of explaining this is I'm focusing the first round on the edges that I know are going to be simple and straightforward. I can get those laid up. Once those start to gel, then I can focus on some of the more futzy areas where I know I'm going to end up having to lay material down, lift it back up, kind of adjust it, set it back down. If I break the tricky areas up from the simple, straightforward ones, it gives me the ability to be able to do that without, when I'm adjusting some of the tricky parts, without pulling up some of those simple areas up along with it. And just like with the fiberglass, the exact same thing applies to your resins, regardless of what type of resin you're using. You want to have all of your material pre-poured and ready to go, just ready to catalyze. And one other quick tip here is when you're pouring out your material batch, or when you're pouring out your material, you want to keep each batch the exact same size, so that when you're going through and you're in a rush, you're catalyzing your material, if they're all the same size, that greatly reduces the chances of accidentally over or under catalyzing a particular batch. If they're all the same, you just know that when you grab that bucket, you throw in X amount of hardener, give it a mix, and you're off to the races. So both materials that I'm working with here are polyester based. You've got your structural repair putty as well as the laminating polyester resin that I'll be using on the actual fiberglass. Now I have these poured out in 8 and 10 ounce batches. However, polyester based material can be catalyzed at 1 to 2% hardener. So I'm going to use the same amount of hardener for either of these batches, regardless if it's 8 or 10 ounces. It's just one is going to be mixed a little bit hotter than the other, but they're both within that 1 and 2%. Again, don't have to think, you just grab and go. Going into this first section here, now notice I did not lay my fillet all the way around the entire perimeter of the transom. The one tip is that when you're working with an area, my general rule of thumb is I like to limit the size area that I'm going to be working with. I want to be able to limit that to an area that I can get turned around start to finish in 20 minutes or less. If that means I've got to break it up into multiple different sections and tackle each one start to finish separately, so be it. But if I keep it within that time frame of start to finish within 20 minutes, I know I'm going to have enough time to be able to do everything that I need to do before my material starts to set up on me and I can no longer work with it. Now, one of the pro tricks when you're doing fillets and tabbing like this is, it kind of plays on what I just mentioned, was limiting the size area that you're working on. I was able to get the fillet laid out and then come in and start laying my glass while the fillet was still soft and able to be shaped. Because the material I'm using for my fillet, which is that structural repair putty, and the polyester resin that I'm using for the glass, because they are the same base, polyester, and they're using the same hardener, I'm able to basically hot coat. I can go one material right over top of the other and have them chemically bond, and there will be no issues with incompatibility. Now, by doing that, I'm able to come in with my roller and shape the fillet so that this is more of a cosmetic thing just because it looks nice, but you're able to shape it and get that exact look that you're after. And I guess I shouldn't just say that it's a cosmetic thing. If I had laid in the fillet, let that cure. Now, the chances of being able to sand that to an exact profile without any little high, low spots, dips, dimples, whatever you want to call them, the chances of being able to sand it to that kind of profile perfectly so that when I'm laying my glass, I'm not accidentally trapping air beneath it, is pretty much slim to none. By doing it this way, yeah, obviously it's going to look nice, but it's also going to ensure that I have perfect surface contact with the fillet and the glass. So now with the first area done, I'm going to repeat this exact same process on 2 of the 3 areas that still need tabbing. Now area number 3, I'll touch more on that when we get to that point, but I'm going to actually hold off on that until tomorrow. But as far as today is concerned, I'm going to be tackling these final 2 areas separately as well. So I'm going to do one area start to finish, and then I'll move on to the third and final area start to finish, and then I'll be closing out the day. Now, before I close out the day, one more tip when you're working with resins. As soon as you add your catalyst or your hardener, that clock starts running. You have a set amount of time to work with that material before it starts to gel and eventually set up on you. So a very good idea is after you add your catalyst, give it a good stir. You want to try and get that material spread out over a layer as thinly as you can, as quickly as you can. Because resin sitting in a cup is no bueno. You get that same material spread out over a thin layer, you're going to have a night and day difference in working time. So good tip, as soon as you get your material catalyzed, even if you just have to haphazardly dogpile it onto some fiberglass and you'll come back and work it all in later, the name of the game is just getting it out of the cup and getting it spread out into a thin layer. So at this point, I'm gonna call it a day, partially because I'm honestly just kind of wiped out, but also because of that corner as well as the one over on the starboard side. If you didn't happen to notice, there's some little wispy bits kind of hanging over the edge, and well, that's not good because this is going to be one of the next corners that needs to get glassed. And if I've got a little bit of material hanging over the edge like that, well, that's going to hold the glass that I need to lay off, and I'm going to be trapping a bunch of air under there. So my best option at this point, take your lumps, walk away for the day, and then tomorrow morning I'll be able to come in and grind off those little bits, and then we should be back in business. So it is the following morning, and I already took care of the prep work. That took all of 5 minutes. It's just a little bit of hand work with some sandpaper, and I got those little wispy bits knocked down, and now we're back in business. So I have 2 remaining areas that I wanted to tackle today, and one of them is going to be very simple and straightforward. The other, that lower corner, that's going to be the tricky part, and that's the reason that I held off on those 2 areas. Even if I didn't have the issue with the overhangs, I was not going to do those 2 bottom corners regardless until all the material had already set up. And I had touched on this earlier in the video, but I knew that those 2 bottom areas, that was going to require a lot of adjusting. So basically, lay it in place, trying to work it in the best you can. It's never going to fit perfectly the first time, and I knew I was going to have to pull it off, make some more adjustments, put it back on. In total, I think I had to do like 4 or 5 different adjustments on those bottom corners, and if I had tried to do that with the other material that this was going to be laying onto, if I had tried to do that with that other surrounding material still wet, it would have been a train wreck. Moving on to the face of the transom, there is a question that I get, I'm not going to say daily, but I would say at least a few times every single week. And that is when you're working with a larger piece, and let's just face it, for one person, this is a pretty good sized piece of glass to be handling by yourself. But in particular, when you're working with a larger piece of glass on either a horizontal, vertical, or even upside down situation, how in the hell are you going to do that? Well, here's a trick. I didn't necessarily do it here, but you'll be able to understand the concept. Basically, you'll want to go through and pre-wet the surface with your catalyzed resin, and then walk away for 15, maybe 20 minutes. You want to wait. It's going to vary depending on what kind of temperatures you're working in, but you want to wait until that resin that you pre-coated on the surface starts to get sticky or kind of tacky. At that point, it's somewhat along the lines of like fly paper. When it gets to that tacky point, you'll be able to take your glass horizontal, upside down, it doesn't matter. You'll be able to stick it up in place, and because that, again, we were dealing with kind of fly paper tackiness, it will hold your resin in place, or it will hold your glass in place while you can then come through and wet everything out. So in total, I think this face piece of the 1708, I think this took 48 ounces of resin total. I had 2 cups with 16 ounces each, and I blew right through those, and then I had to jump down, quickly mix up another 8 ounce, and then blew through that, and then had to jump down again, and then mix up another 8 ounce. So by the time this was all said and done, I was pushing almost 30 minutes into just laying up this face piece. And the resin that I had mixed up when I first started was already starting to tack up. So long story short, I was starting to run out of working time. So, time to kick it into high gear. I knew I had, at this point, maybe 5 more minutes left to get any of this excess air worked out. So I was grabbing the fin roller, I was grabbing this little plastic spatula, dipping the roller back into more resin, just trying to work all of the air that I could out before I completely lost all of my working time. And honestly, when it was all said and done, I'd say I got a 99 point something of all the air worked out. Now, kind of a funny, unique thing about 1708 is, and I have yet to figure this out or understand why, but when you're wetting it out, there are areas, tiny little spots here and there that just don't completely turn translucent. They just kind of retain a little white speck. So I was kind of going back and forth between chasing those down. You know, is it an actual air pocket? Is it just a discoloration in the actual glass? I don't know. Certainly, any of the spots, if there is any air left back in there, it's a half or a quarter of the size of a little BB. So it's nothing of size. You know, certainly nothing to worry about. But oh well, it is what it is. It's not perfect, but you know, to be honest, I have yet to really see anything in life that is perfect. Except my girls, of course. So at this point, I have 1 full layer of glass over the entire transom. Unfortunately, that's just 1 of 4 layers of glass that I want to eventually get on here. And even though when I was cutting this glass, I undersized it, anticipating some stretch when I was rolling it out, those little gremlins that go by the name Wispy Bits, yeah, they came back and got me again. But just like before, it's a simple fix, but it does put me on hold for the rest of the day, you know, until this cures and I can come back and actually trim it back off. So anticipating the way that these remaining 3 layers of glass are going to play out, I think it's probably safe to presume that it's going to take me most, if not all, of next week just to get that part done. And if that's the case, I don't know if there's going to be really much to put together for a video for next week. It's just going to be a rinse and repeat of this, except 3 more times. So at this point, I'm not quite sure exactly how next week is going to play out. I mean, if all goes smooth, you know, trying to get this rest of this material up, I'm looking at 2, maybe 3 days. If it doesn't go quite so smooth, then I'm probably looking at the entire week. Now, something that I've been kind of kicking the can on here for well over a month or so is that I really need to take a trip back to the old shop and check in on that. I haven't been there at all winter long. And so I want to make sure everything there is in good shape. But I also need to meet with a realtor. I'm going to be putting that shop up for sale. And you know, I don't expect it's going to move anytime real soon, just because commercial property and Herbster, I mean, but who knows? You never know. But either way, I need to get it up on the market because, well, I don't need it anymore. And while I'm there, I might as well load up another truckload of stuff and get it back here, so it's just that much less that I got to move if and when it does actually sell. So like I said, I'm not sure exactly what next week is going to bring. I kind of am leaning towards I should just bite the bullet and just say this is going to be a bit of a time suck, anticipate that, get my running around done, and then just kind of close that chapter and move on. So I'm going to think about it over the weekend. I'll let the folks over on Patreon know kind of how things are looking. But as far as next week, if there isn't a video, yeah, maybe a little bit of a fair warning. And on that note, I think I'm going to close this video out. So as always, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found some of these little tips and tricks helpful for your upcoming projects. And if you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you're notified whenever new videos come out. More or less every Sunday morning, 9 a.m. Central. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave those down below. I will do my best to get back with you. And as always, thank you for your time. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend, and I will see you very soon. Have a good week.
This has been a Boatworks Today production.